Right, okay. Question 3, structure, paper 1. Yesterday we looked at 2 of the main structural features in this text here. Can anybody put their hand up and tell me what structural features we looked at? The 2 most important ones. So, okay, good. We looked at foreshadowing, which is part of looking at endings, isn't it? What else did we look at? So remember we did a bullet point list of the most important structural features to look at. Ladisha? Excellent. Okay, so we looked at beginnings and endings and perspective shifts. We identified some quotations that you could use to support our points. Can anyone tell me then 2 top tips I gave you yesterday as to the types of things that you can highlight, irrespective of what the text is? So it doesn't matter what the text is, what can you highlight?
Beside every paragraph.
Excellent. Okay, so you can highlight the first bit, the first few words of every paragraph. Why, Ricky? What does that show you?
Time shift.
Excellent. Time shifts, place shifts, it could be character shifts. So always highlight the first few words of each paragraph and make sure that you quote them. Okay, what else can you always highlight? The first and last sentence, great, which is where, for example, in the last sentence, you can always talk about foreshadowing, if there's any foreshadowing there. Right. I want you now to refer back to your bullet point list that we did of structural features. Can anybody tell me what was the 3rd most important thing to talk about with regards to structure? So what was the 3rd most important thing? So have a look, you've all got this list written down. Good. A structurally significant sentence. So just remind me, somebody else other than Ladisha, what is the definition of a structurally significant sentence or a key sentence? That's another term that's used. Sophie?
Something that reveals information.
Good. So new information is revealed or something changes. So what I want all of you to do now, as quickly as you can with your highlighter, I want you to read through, read through the whole text again, and highlight a sentence that you think is structurally significant. So there's a turning point or some new information is revealed. Now, the thing with this is, it can be anywhere in the text. So it might be in the middle, but it might be at the beginning or the end. Okay? So just try and find me one. You may get different answers as well, which is fine, as long as you can argue that it's structurally significant. So have a quick look. I'll give you 30 seconds or so. I know that's not long. See what you can find. I think this text is quite hard to find a structurally significant sentence, but there are definitely some in there. Right, I can see that Sophie's highlighting something, so possibly she's found something. Jordan seems to have found something as well. Anyone else? Put your hand up if you found a sentence that you think might be structurally significant. Okay, I know not everybody has, but just for the sake of time, can anybody actually tell me then what they've found, and can you justify to me why that sentence is a key sentence? So, Jordan, what did you highlight?
It was near the end. It was the Charles Smith.
Okay, alright, so this bit here, yeah? So, if you all want to highlight this, I think we might have highlighted it already for language. Okay. So, Jordan believes that that is a structurally significant sentence. So get used to using the term, because that is your structural terminology. Just remind me again, Callum, what's another name for a structurally significant sentence that would be quicker to write for you? I've just used it a few minutes ago. Alicia, tell me. A key sentence, good. Right, Jordan, can you justify to me why you think that is a key sentence?
It reveals like who is like disturbing the person, the protagonist.
Okay, brilliant, okay. So, let's just write down then that idea. So, structurally significant sentences generally reveal new information. And like Jordan suggested, it reveals that the police... Well, tell me, what are the police actually supposed to do? What is their main job? Protect people. Okay. So, Sophie, how is it different here?
And instead of protecting, they're more attacking.
Good. Okay. So let's sum that up as the police are the enemy of the people. So immediately, that sets the reader up in the knowledge that the police aren't going to be there as a helpful authority, they're going to be there as an enemy. And I know we're not looking at language, but it's the word snooping, isn't it, that tells you that, because snooping is not a positive thing. So, you've identified the structural feature, you've got your quotation, we've sort of started to explain why it's structurally significant. Can anyone tell me why that would interest the reader? So what we've just said, why would that interest the reader? Sophie?
The reader wants to know why the police are being the enemy rather than, the...
Good. Okay, so let's write that down then. What's the phrase I've always got to use when I talk about the reader? Here. in question.
Or this might the reader, but I don't know.
Well, think about the question. This would interest the reader, yeah. So go on, just tell me again, Sophie, why would it interest the reader?
It's unusual for the police to be the enemy rather than the society's. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good, okay. Good. And we already said, didn't we, when we looked at the ending of the extract, that it's being foreshadowed that he's going to have some kind of conflict with the police in the future. So, definitely. So it's all about how you justify that a sentence is structurally significant, and I think Jordan did that, because it reveals, doesn't it, that the police are not as you would expect them to be. Did anybody find any other sentences, though, that you could argue are structurally significant? Because Sophie, what I saw you highlight, I think, was higher up in the text. What did you highlight?
I don't know if it's right.
Go on then, what do you think? As long as you can justify it, it's fine.
I just said he was 39 and had a varicose ulcer on his right ankle.
Okay,
I
why?
thought it might suggest that further on, if he's running away or something, it might help with that.
Okay, so you think it reveals that he's like weak in some way. Okay? I'm going to turn that page back then now. So, whereabouts is that again, Sophie? Is it the second paragraph?
It's the second one.
Okay. So the fact that he went slowly, resting several times on the way. Good. So again, you can argue it's a key sentence because Winston's physical weakness is revealed, the protagonist's physical weakness. Okay, and like Sophie said, that would interest the reader because you may think, well, if there's going to be a conflict later between him and the police, he's not really in peak physical fitness to evade them, to escape from them. So we could talk about that. I'm not going to write that on there because, again, you've only got 10 minutes in an exam to write your answer, so we can't say too much. Did anyone argue that there's another structurally significant sentence where we learn that this really is not a nice society to live in? Because I think there are two other sentences that really make it explicit that this is not a nice place to live. Have a look in the text. So, okay, it's a bit poor. That can be the same in a lot of places. but there are some sentences in this text that make it explicitly clear that this is a negative place to live, where information is revealed about the way people are treated in this society. Towards the bottom half of the text. Callum.
Outside with a sugar and get paid.
I don't know, because that's stated at the beginning, isn't it, the fact that the world's cold. It's in that paragraph though, I think. I've not got it on the right page. It's in that paragraph. Something that we don't have around our country now. Pardon? Right, okay. Couldn't you argue that that sentence is structurally significant? I think you could. Right, Emily looks a bit confused. Can anybody tell me why that might be a structurally significant sentence? What does it reveal about the society? Victoria, what does it reveal about the society?
That they're like, I don't know, maybe like united together or something?
Yes, possibly, but Big Brother is watching you. Is that supposed to be in a supportive way or in a threatening way? Right,
It was sick, so that was everything.
good. So, have another go. Why is it structurally significant? What do we learn about the society? What conditions are they living in?
They're basically just watching what they do, like no one's like in privacy, and everyone has to like watch out what they do.
Good. So, yeah, the citizens clearly have no privacy. So, it reveals that bit of information. You could argue that, I'm just going to make it brief here, that this would shock the reader. I know we've not used the word interest, but as long as you talk about a reader reaction, that's fine. I would develop that. I'd say this would shock the reader because most people, certainly in Britain, are used to living in a society where we've got freedom of speech. Anyway, the key point is you find a structurally significant sentence. They'll often be easier in other texts. So like I say, that oysters text, the Whitstable oysters, when she says this was me, or that was me, that's a structurally significant sentence because finally it's revealed to us who the protagonist is. I think most of you are familiar with that text. Okay, right. Go back to your list of structural features. We've spoken about the three most important ones. I now want you to look at the remaining, I think we have 4 more points on that list of structural features. So am I right in saying that we had motifs, we had juxtaposition, we had paragraph length, particularly looking at dialogue, and we have narrative perspective. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. Out of all of those things, because they don't all occur in every text, which is why they're least important on the list, out of all of those things, what can you spot in that text? Are there any motifs? Is there any juxtaposition? What do you think? Are there any motifs or juxtaposition or dialogue, etc.? What could we talk about next? Give me some ideas, because you've got to in the exam. Sophie?
There's no dialogue, so that could
Excellent.
show that look, they're very restrictive in the way they speak, if they can't say much.
That's brilliant, okay? So this doesn't really match with a specific quotation. Well, you're supposed to have quotations to meet the mark scheme. So Sophie, could you anywhere in that use a quotation to support that there's no dialogue? I know that's really hard. But is there any quotation that suggests that he's locked inside his own head?
I'm not sure.
Can anybody find a quotation that suggests that Winston doesn't have freedom of speech, that he's locked inside his own thoughts? Shannon, have a look, see what you can find in there.
Winston turns switching the voice some more.
Okay, right. Why do you think that shows that he's got no voice himself? picked a good quote, definitely. Are they always being, like you are now, talked at rather than talking themselves?
Always listening, not talking.
Good, and they're being forced to listen, aren't they? Very much like you. Okay, so we could say that there is, and I'm really glad Sophie picked this out, just because there's no dialogue, it doesn't mean that you don't talk about dialogue. Often it's significant that there's no dialogue in a text, it's for a reason. So the lack of dialogue, which is supported by that, so it's supported by the fact that Winston is forced to listen rather than talk, reinforces the lack of freedom of speech. So do you see how every structural feature is working together to show that this is a dictatorship? Because we've commented on the thought police, the police patrol, the lack of freedom of speech, which is represented through the lack of dialogue, etc. Again, when we write it up, we'll link it back to how it would interest the reader. But it basically interests us for some of the reasons we've already said, because we live in a democracy where we've got freedom of speech. Okay, I'm just going to ask you one more thing. We could talk about narrative perspective, and we could talk about juxtaposition, but I want to talk about motifs. If you said that there was a motif, a recurring idea throughout this text, what would you say that idea was? Pardon?
I don't know, just said that. But, could be like the atmosphere,
What is the atmosphere like?
where it's like, it's quite negative.
Negative. Right, brilliant. So you could say that there's a motif of negativity throughout this text. So I'm just going to change the colour of my highlighter for a second. Can any of you find for me where there is any quotations that we could use to support that it's negative? A negative atmosphere. Because we need some quotations. So go back, I'm going to pick individual people. Okay, right. Emily, paragraph 1, the short one. Pick out a phrase for me that supports that it's in negative atmosphere. It can be 2 words, don't mind, anything.
It's like negative.
Yeah.
Cold.
Okay, good. So the fact that it's cold, and that's repeated, isn't it, in the final paragraph as well. Any other words that fit into that motif of negativity? Ricky? Oh, go on, sorry, vile as well, good. We could even have the phrase vile wind. Ricky?
I swerve Richie Dust.
Yeah, good. Let's move on to the second paragraph. Sophie?
Hate.
Hate.
It's in preparation for hate week.
Yeah, good. Okay. Lovely. Let's go on to the third paragraph. Let's just get a word from each now, or a phrase from each paragraph. Third paragraph.
Dulled.
Dulled. Okay, yeah. Anything else in there that's negative?
Cold, yeah.
Cold. Yeah, good. The cold of the winter. We've got cold again there. So, in fact, you could say that not only is there a motif of a negative atmosphere, there's a motif of coldness, isn't there? So, let's just label that somewhere. There's your structural term. So, a motif of cold and negativity runs throughout the text, reinforcing to the reader, obviously, that this is not a nice place to live. So it interests you because you want to know whether things are going to change in the future or whether it will remain the same. Okay, now I know we've only spoken about 5 of the 7 structural features, but again, we've got to be realistic with time, and you've only got 10 minutes in the exam. So, what I now want to do with you is actually write an answer. So, if you can all turn to some lined paper, can I just have a volunteer to read out the question 3 again? Because that's what you should always do before you actually write your answer. So, how is question 3 phrased? Sophie.
How does the writer structure the whole text to interest the reader?
Good. So how am I going to start my answer? Ladisha, how am I going to start my answer? Right. Good. I like the fact that she didn't say the writer has structured the whole text because you're in an exam, it's time wasting. Refer to a structural feature immediately. So at the beginning of the text, the writer immediately establishes. Go on, Ladisha, keep going if you can. When the okay, so when the events of the novel are taking place. Now we've got to embed a quotation. So let's put in, as we are told that is right. It's better to embed your quotations into your sentences. So Alicia, I know you're writing that down. Can you just have a look at your text? What are we told that it is at the beginning that reveals when it's happening? A what? Go on. A cold day when?
This is a bright cold day.
Okay. So, as we are told, it is a bright cold day in April. What time, Alicia?
People.
And the clock is striking then.
Yeah. Okay. And the clocks were striking 13. Okay. Right. You can see that I'm not doing all of this, you know, full stop. I know this because, or this suggests that. I'm trying to make it more fluent. So we've embedded our quotes, and now I want to say which, well, what's the phrase that's in the question that I've got to get into my answer?
Interesting.
Good. So look at your notes, because we did talk about this. It interests the reader that we're told when it's happening. Why? What did we say? Why is that interesting to the reader? Interest the reader because what? And I know we put this on notes somewhere. Jordan, can you see why it interests us?
Because there's a lack of information established at the beginning.
About what in particular that we might want to know?
Who's involved?
Excellent, okay. So it interests us because there is a lack of information about who is involved in the story. Somebody developed that then, and what did we say yesterday? Naturally, as a reader, what do you normally want to find out at the beginning of the text? Good. So you want information about the protagonist, don't you? I'm finding this urge to want to put, the reader would want to read on, or the reader would want to continue reading. But remember that the examiners don't like that, so try to avoid that statement. So naturally, readers would want to find out more about the protagonist by reading further into the extract or the novel. Okay, right. Once you've written that down, just remind me again, one person in the room, what are the 3 bullet points on the mark scheme? So, Caitlin, tell me, what are the 3 bullet points on the mark scheme? The structure.
This is quotations,
Yeah.
effect on the reader,
Yeah.
and subject terminology.
Good, right. So just look at that first bit of the answer that we've written. You should have a highlighter near you. Okay, we've met quotations, haven't we? Because we've got 2 embedded quotations. So just highlight your quotes in one colour. So that's one of the bullet points on the mark scheme ticked off. If there's another highlighter near you, just swap the colour. She said that another bullet point on the mark scheme was identification of structural features, so subject terminology. Where have I used subject terminology? Because I have. Remember, it's not language, so I don't need to talk about similes or metaphors.
The word establishes.
Good, yeah. So that in itself is structural terminology, and there's another word, beginning. And it's not a fancy word, you see, everyone can talk about the beginning of a text. So you've got your structural terminology. Change the colour again if you can. What's the third thing that I had to do to get my marks on the mark scheme? Victoria, what was the third thing again? Good, okay, so let's have a look. I've used that phrase from the question. Now if your entire answer is structured in that way, there is no reason why you can't get the top marks of whatever level you fall into. The examiner will get an overall picture of what level you fall into, but if you do the 3 bullet points in that level, you'll be top of that level. So potentially that could be 8 out of 8 for some of you. How many marks do you reckon that would get so far? Out of 8? 2, yeah, okay. Now, like I've said before, I bet some of you didn't even get 2 on the first mark, because you probably didn't know what to talk about. So let's carry on then. So we'll start a new paragraph. What should I talk about next? I've spoken about the beginning, so look at your bullet point list again if you need to. What do I talk about next? Naturally. The ending. So, go on, Ladisha. I know you started that bit, but start this bit for me. Just say the end. Yeah?
The writer foreshadowing. That will still have conflict.
Okay, I'm just going to add in there to what you said. So at the end of the extract column, the writer foreshadows that Winston might later in the novel, because that's what foreshadowing is, it's hinting at something later in the novel, might later in the novel have a conflict with the thought police, as he tells us, okay, again, I know you're writing, but can somebody integrate the relevant quotation into that sentence so it makes sense? Sophie?
Something thought for you that mattered.
Good. Okay. And again, you'll see that I'm trying to make it fluent, so I'm going straight into why that interests the reader. So, again, we probably made notes on this. Why does that interest the reader? The fact that it's being foreshadowed that he's going to have conflict. How many books do you read? Well, how many books do you read? Full stop. But how many books do you read that there's no action in them at all? They just stay the same. You'd not read the book, would you? If everything stayed the same, you wouldn't read the book. So think about conflict. Why does it interest the reader? Sophie?
It predicts that there won't be action in the future.
Okay? Because it hints at later action in the novel. Which would excite a reader. Now again, you might be sitting there thinking, no book has ever excited me. but books do excite readers, you know, particularly people that enjoy reading. So you've got to imagine that you are an enthusiastic reader. So it hints at later action in the novel which would excite a reader. I'm just going to develop it a bit. Who would be anticipating? Now, here's another structural term. What's the most exciting part of a narrative, of a story called? The climax. So they'd be anticipating a climactic point in the middle of the novel. Okay. So you can see that what we're writing is realistic in length so far. You know, we're not spending ages on it. How much have you written? Is it about a third of a side? Yeah? Okay. So you can see that in 10 minutes we'd be expecting you to do a side at least. When you know what you're doing, you've got to get fast. So you'd be doing a side in 10 minutes. That is realistic. So 3 times as much as this so far. Right, again, you should be able to see, I'm going to expect you to do this as I'm doing it, that we have got structural terminology. Where? Destiny, where? Okay, good. Any other structural terminology? Foreshadows. Any others? Climactic. Good, okay. We'll leave it there, but you can see that there's quotations and there's interest the reader. And all we've spoken about is beginnings and endings. And that would get you probably 4 marks. Okay? So we've not even gone on to perspective shifts. We'll do that tomorrow. Right. Thank you.